Welcome to this episode of Viewpoint. Today we have in our studios a chartered accountant, an investigative journalist, a broadcaster, a sports editor, an author, a public speaker. And if you thought I had too many people in the studios, you're wrong. I have Mr. Mihir Bose, who has under his belt 24 books, and one of his books, new books, Esprit of a Sport, is going to be published in January 2012. Mr. Mihir Bose, welcome to the studios.
Thank you.
It's an honor to receive you here.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
Tell us something about yourself as a journalist. How do you see the field of journalism today in this country?
The field of journalism has completely changed.
Mm-hmm.
When I was well, I still am a journalist. When I started as a journalist, you went and found out stories. Now I think there is too much of internet surfing. Mm-hmm. That you get stories from the internet. People have put some Viewpoint up or some news up. You get from Twitter. In the old days, you knocked on doors, you rang people, you made contacts. You said I was an investigative journalist. I like to think I still am. You tried to connect all the links up and the threads up. And I have a feeling that there's less of that now.
Less of legwork.
Less of legwork. People are not being sent out.
Mm-hmm.
Newspapers are not doing well. Newspapers are declining. My daughter, who is studying at the LSE, she doesn't buy newspapers. Now, I can't imagine a morning having my cup of coffee, as I do, without turning pages of the newspaper. That's what I was brought up on when I was a child, and that's what I still do. Right. But I think the newspaper industry is going through a bad time.
But do you think that the print media would suffer further and probably one day this will disappear?
I don't think it'll disappear. I think the other forms of media, television, Twittering, all sorts of things like that, it's a bit when radio came, when television came, mm-hmm. Newspapers had to adjust. I don't think the written word will disappear. Kindle, you'll still have books and things like that. Right. But I think they have to adjust to a new world. And the other new world is, of course, where is newspapers increasing in circulation in the subcontinent?
Right.
More and more people are becoming literate. So there is scope for newspapers, but newspapers have to change. They have to adjust to the new reality, and that is not very easy.
Right. You mentioned the subcontinent. So the hot news from subcontinent is that Mr. Manmohan Singh, the Prime Minister of India, is visiting Bangladesh. He has already arrived there, and this is going to be a 30-hour visit, a state visit, in which he is going to meet only for 80 minutes the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hasina, and they are going to discuss bilateral matters. Mr. Manmohan Singh arrives at the head of a 135-member delegation. He is accompanied by 3 or 4 chief ministers of the adjoining states. There is the concern for water, there is the concern for trade, the matters of bilateral trade and bilateral relations across the board, like India wants transit facilities through Bangladesh to reach its northeastern states. India wants transit facilities to reach other countries like Nepal and Bhutan. India wants to use the facilities of Mangla Port and Chittagong Port. I think there's too much of on the platter. And can they really discuss all these things in 30 hours, given that they had devoted all the time? See?
I don't think so. I think the problem with India and Bangladesh is that it has never really blossomed into the sort of friendship and alliance it should have blossomed into. India played a big part in Bangladesh getting its freedom, and that was a great saga in Bangladesh's history, winning its freedom in '71. And after that, the relationship have been on ebbs and flows. Now maybe it is on an ebb, but it has never really hit the sort of natural alliance. The relationship between India and Bangladesh should be a special relationship like that between Britain and America. When the American president comes, despite all the problems, there is a feeling of warmth there. Here's a country, Bangladesh is a wonderful example of how culture and historical roots are more important than religion. I mean, both countries share a great poet, Tagore, a language, all sorts of historical links are there. And somehow the politicians haven't made it work. And in a way, I suspect the fault lies more with the Indian politicians, who I think have not really recast their foreign policy from the days of Nehru. There is still that sort of big brother of Asia, still that sort of moral high ground, which I think gets up the noses of some of the other countries, and they say, you know, don't lecture to us. And I think Indian foreign policy still tends to lecture, as if just because of the way they won independence all those years ago, it gives them a higher moral platform than anybody else.
Does this big brotherly attitude show in the fact that after the visit of an Indian Prime Minister, probably it was Mr. Vajpayee, who visited Bangladesh in 1999, and this visit comes after 11 years. I mean, these are neighbors with friendly relationship and also problems. I mean, of course, neighbors have problems, but there should be one way of solving those problems. Like we have problems of the water sharing. We have the problems of enclaves, you see. There are 50 major rivers that we share. See, there are 300 small rivers, and we have to find a way to solve. A lot of people say that probably the Bangladeshi negotiating team lacks in expertise, lacks in probably dedication, or probably just ability to negotiate it correctly.
It's the sad events that took place in Bangladesh soon after its independence and the assassination of Sheikh Mujib and so on, and Bangladesh has gone through turmoil. But what I think the Indians haven't philosophically worked out is that Bangladesh is an independent country. It is not going to be a satellite of India, and you know, it can't be treated as a satellite of India. You talk of the rivers. Why have the rivers to be shared? Because at one stage all these rivers were part of one common land. But you've got to work out how to do it, you know. Political realities come first, and I don't think the Indians have spent enough time. Maybe there are faults in the Bangladesh negotiations. Of course, the country periodically changes government, you know. One government comes in and the other government boycotts the assembly and things like that. So, you know, it has taken time to settle down on its democratic roots, but then India, with its democratic traditions, could have played a much bigger role in giving a helping hand. And I'm not sure it has done that.
Probably that's the spirit of democracy, that one government comes and the other government goes. See, they are properly elected. But again, I get your point that they should have the object that the country comes first before anything else. Right now, we have huge traffic on our roads in Bangladesh. See, we have not created the infrastructure that will be sufficient enough to take on that kind of extra load of traffic. See, how to go about that?
Well, I mean, it's going to be a problem unless you get the highways right. I mean, you know, the major linkages in Bangladesh, which this government had promised, and I believe this was one of this electoral planks, hasn't quite worked out yet. It's halfway through its administration. So that is going to be a problem. India see these transit routes as very important, because India is getting increasingly worried about the fact that China is spreading itself. You know, China, for instance, India used to think that Nepal was a satellite of India. That is no longer the case. India used to think it had good relations with Sri Lanka. Now China has much better relationship with Sri Lanka. So I think to a certain extent Indian foreign policy in this case is driven by the fear of what China is doing. And many of these facilities that they want are directed not towards what happens to Bangladesh, but more what is happening to China.
Is it just China, or is it just India, or are there some other powers that are restraining India not to behave properly?
Well, Indian foreign policy is going through a major change. Indian foreign policy historically under Jawaharlal Nehru was pro-Soviet, you know, non-aligned and so on and so forth, and was quite anti-American. Now the Indians are becoming pro-American, and yet the Indians philosophically have never discussed this question. Where does India stand in the world? 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when Nehru was formulating his policy, that was fine. There was a clash of communism versus capitalism, and you could say, I'm neutral, and you know, there is good in both worlds and all that sort of thing. But that world has disappeared. Now we live in the world of terrorism, Al-Qaeda and so on. Pakistan is proving a very, very difficult state. Pakistan has immense problems, despite the fact that Pakistan is an alliance of America. The alliance is of such that America can go and send its troops in and kill somebody in Pakistan without telling Pakistan. You know, I mean, that is the sort of nature of the alliance there.
Take away Bin Laden.
Yes, we're talking about the death of Bin Laden. Now, I think the Indians haven't worked out their sort of foreign policy goals. Are they going to be an ally of America? Is that going to be India's mission in that part of the world? If so, how is that alliance going to become about, and how is it going to affect? Because India must recognize that a lot of the countries around India are very resentful of the fact that India would want to dominate them, that Indian economic power will overwhelm them. You know, that has to be taken into account.
Yes, yes. Some people say that Indian policy, I mean, whether foreign or trade, it's very much Pakistan-centric, you see. And that is how it kind of ignores the smaller partners in the SAARC.
Yes, India is still, to a great extent, is still worried about Pakistan, the country with the nuclear weapons, you know, all the historic things that have happened in the old days, you know, going back to the Hindu-Muslim tension and India-Pakistan and so on. So I think there is that factor very much so. And of course, Kashmir is a sore point. Let's face it, India has not solved the problem of Kashmir. It has not solved the problem. This is a democratic country which has used incalculable force to keep Kashmir within India, when, you know, if I think there was a plebiscite today in Kashmir, it probably would vote to leave India.
Thank you very much. We are going on a break. In this episode, this section, we have talked about Mr. Mihir Bose as a person, and we'll talk more about him. We have touched upon Manmohan Singh's visit to Dhaka today, and the problems, the expectations, the concerns. And when we come back, we will continue with the same discussion. Thank you.